Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Michelle Smith. I am a registered licensed dietitian and I am also a certified lifestyle coach. I'm here on behalf of Harvard Pilgrim Health and Tufts Health Plan. Thank you for joining our presentation today on eating mindfully. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to place them in the chat box and we'll try to make time after the presentation to go over them. So I'm just going to turn off my camera here and we're going to get started. So before we move into the next slide, I invite you to ask yourself, what does eating mindfully mean to you? And is this something that you think you practice? And I also want to share with you that you're going to find that we're going to use the word eating mindfully, mindful eating, and intuitively interchangeably. They're very similar, but we're going to really dive more into what we call intuitive eating because that is what we are talking about is eating mindfully. So we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. Okay, so what are the benefits of eating mindfully or mindful eating? So it's important to understand that when we foster this style of eating, we are more apt to make better food choices. It will lower our stress levels, decrease anxiety around food. We will find that we're more in tune with our hunger and fullness cues. It improves digestion. And a lot of times it's because we're present and we're eating slowly and it's not rushed. We will find that there will be a better relationship with food. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Increases your self-esteem, stops the yo-yo dieting, that last meal mentality, decreases emotional and stress eating, and it's much more sustainable than a diet. So I'm sure that you're all familiar with these behaviors, and I want you to ask yourself, are these behaviors that you experience on a day-to-day basis, and which ones would you like to change? I do want to share with you what mindful eating is. Mindful eating came out long before intuitive eating. So you're going to see that mindful eating is a part of the eating mindfully or intuitive eating steps or processes. So mindful eating is minimizing distractions while eating, such as turning off the TV or keeping your phone out of reach, savoring tastes and textures, experiencing your food with all five senses, eating slowly and chewing more thoroughly, taking smaller bites, setting down utensils between bites, practicing gratitude, paying close attention to the body's hunger and fullness cues while eating, and acknowledging feelings about or responses to various foods without judgment. So again, here's where you'd ask yourself, do I participate in this style of eating? What areas do I need to embrace? So before we really dive into eating mindfully or intuitive eating, I think it's important to understand that there's so much more to why we choose the foods we choose or what's really going on. So as a dietitian in private practice and working for insurance companies, we're finding that really what's creating this havoc with food choices is this dieting paradox. Okay, so here's just according to Boston's Medical Center, 45 million Americans go on a diet each year. They spend billions of dollars on weight loss products, and it's still happening. Nearly 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese, and they're not able to keep the weight off. Okay. Also, I am finding a lot. Childhood obesity is increasing significantly. About 12.7 million or 17% of children are struggling with their weight. They're struggling with living in larger bodies. All right, so obesity is one of the easiest medical conditions, and I don't like to use obesity as a medical condition. It's really not the medical condition, it's the behaviors that are created because of what we're encouraging. So the behaviors is the emotional distress around food, the eating disorders, the disordered eating is very prevalent because of this. So it's super important to understand this. So, like I said, it's the dieting paradox that's contributing to this. The pursuit of thinness has become such a battle cry for most Americans. Okay, the mindset that eating a morsel of fat or non nutritive food is a life sentence of guilt. So, this is what happens when people label foods and they start to feel guilty and then they derail and then it just becomes this domino effect. So, it's contributed by commercials and social media and magazines, and clinicians are at fault as well. And then that creates this labeling of foods or this thought that there's good food and there's bad food. So, what is exactly dieting? So, dieting is short term starvation. This is why they don't work. It's not sustainable. It's Do diets work? Of course not. It's the root of the problem. It's why people are becoming mindless eaters, emotional eaters. So research shows that dieting increases your risk of gaining more weight. A team of UCLA researchers found more than 2/3 of the people regained more weight than they lost. So again, I want you to ask yourself, are you falling into this diet paradox? Do you find that this is happening to you? Okay, so it's not because we're failures, it's the diet. Like I said, it's not sustainable. So biologically, your body experiences the diet process as a form of starvation. Your cells don't know you are voluntarily restricting your food intake, so your body will shift into primal survival mode, meaning when you lose weight fast, you're going to lose your metabolism will slow down. You'll lose the key elements to increasing metabolism, which is lean body mass. Food cravings will escalate, and then there will be rebound weight gain. So, what we're going to talk about moving forward is making peace with food. This is what will guide us towards eating mindfully. I want you to keep in mind that we're going to go through several behaviors. And I want you to know that it takes time to work on each behavior and it takes support. So I encourage you not to think that you have to make all these changes at once. Just pick one area to work on at a time. So, why make peace with food? Diet advice is all about restriction and willpower. It tells you to just say no to all the foods you love and enjoy. No wonder so many people are trapped in a cycle of restriction and binging or that last supper mentality. Give yourself permission to eat the foods you love. Embrace it. Identify how it makes you feel when you say, I have permission to eat whatever I enjoy. Experience the taste. This is where the mindful eating comes into play. Experience the taste and the effect that the food has on your body so that you stop that cycle of dieting. So here's what it looks like, right? The diet cycle. We start a diet, we restrict foods that we enjoy, we feel deprived, there's cravings, there's probably dreams, things like that. We tend to give in. And then what we say to ourselves, that guilt, we basically feel guilty, and then we feel like we're a failure, and then we just fall off track because again, it's not sustainable. So the signs that you need to make peace with food. So this is where you want to really ask yourself, am I participating in any of these behaviors that we talk about here? And what's the one thing you want to change? So we're going to talk about intuitive eating. And one of the 10 principles of intuitive eating is making peace with food. And so basically, there's repeated unsuccessful attempts at weight loss. This is a sign that you need to make peace with food. Are you labeling food as good or bad? Another sign that we would need to make peace with food. Are there feelings of extreme guilt after eating? We should never feel guilty about eating something that we thoroughly enjoy. Do we have specific rules about food? Are we finding that we're compulsive or we're experiencing binge eating behaviors? Do we feel out of control when we eat? And do we feel out of touch with our hunger and fullness cues? These are super important questions to ask yourself. Do you feel like you would benefit from making peace with food? And what does this mean? What does it mean to make peace with food? So it means allowing all foods into your eating world so that a choice for chocolate becomes emotionally equal to a choice for a peach. When you know the food will be there and allowed day after day, it doesn't become so important to have it. This is so important to pay attention to, okay? Because food loses its power over you if you start to label it as good or bad. So before we move into making peace with food, it's also important to identify, well, what kind of an eater am I? Because it's amazing how many people don't realize that there's actually three groups of eaters. So we have what we call the careful eater, or they can even fall into the category of orthorexia. It's an eating disorder. So it's vigilant about the foods they put into their body. They worry about what to eat. They spend waking hours planning out their next meal or snack. It takes over. Okay. It literally takes over. And that's what an eating disorder is. And they undereat and they monitor quantity and they label foods as good or bad. So this is a careful eater. A professional dieter is someone who's tried every commercial diet, and they know a lot about portions, calories, and diet foods. They're well versed in counting carbohydrates. Then there's the unconscious eater. They pair eating with other activities. So this is what we call mindless eating. So they're eating and doing another activity, maybe watching TV and eating, reading and eating, studying and eating. So with these three eating behaviors, there are subtypes. So for example, there's the chaotic. They're too busy, they're hectic, they're overscheduled to take the time to fuel their bodies. There's a refuse not. So they're vulnerable to the presence of food regardless of hungry or full. So for example, let's say you're in the office and you just ate, you should be satisfied, but someone comes by with a bowl of chocolates and offers you some. So why not? Refuse not, right? Versus eating mindfully. There's the waste not. They value the dollar, the food dollar. They're the clean plate club. They don't want to throw that food away. And then there's the emotional eater. They use food to deal with stress, anger, and loneliness. So this is really important to identify what behaviors are you engaging in. And the reason being is these are ingrained in us. These are habits we've created. We can certainly break them, but it's going to take time to break these behaviors. But identify that these habits can reoccur. And those are what we call triggers to kind of derail us. So how to make peace with food. The way we make peace with food and get off this pendulum of restricting and binging is to practice saying yes to food. Again, giving yourself full permission to eat the foods you enjoy. Allow yourself to eat without the rules or restrictions that put certain foods up on a pedestal. Allowing yourself opportunities to practice eating these foods like a normal human being. The key is unconditional permission to eat. So we start by legalizing all foods in order to make peace with it. So adopt an all foods can fit approach to eating, changing our mindset, trusting our body. This is so hard for a lot of my clients is letting go of this and really learning to trust their bodies. They really struggle with this. This takes a lot of practice, but it will end the food and weight obsessions. It can feel scary to have this type of freedom with food. That's very normal behavior, very normal thought processes. It's a process of change and building trust in yourself. So remember to be kind, give yourself space to learn and grow from your perceived mistakes. Mistakes are meant to happen for a reason. We learn from them and what can we do differently, especially when it comes to food. Let yourself eat when you are hungry and choose the foods that sound good to you and eat at an amount that satisfies you. We're going to get into identifying hunger and satisfying. So try this exercise to legalize food. So basically, in a nutshell, what you would do is you take your six food groups, your grains, your fruits, vegetables, your dairies, protein, and your fats. You make a list, and then you put a star next to the foods that you enjoy, allow yourself to enjoy regularly. Then you would put a circle around the foods that you enjoy occasionally, and you would underline the foods that you avoid or eat rarely or that you may label as bad. So now what you want to do is review your list and assess how you perceive these foods. Practice now, and then what you want to do is practice legalizing the underlined foods. And this is where it's super helpful to work with someone who's experienced in intuitive eating. Now, can you answer these questions? Once you've legalized the underlying foods, what would it be like to detach negative beliefs from these underlined foods? I just want to share with you a lot of my clients will say, they feel freedom from food. They feel less anxiety about shopping. They feel less anxiety about going to social events. So that's super important. The other question to ask yourself is how would this shift your mindset and promote a better relationship with food? So I'm just going to share with you again. A couple of my clients will say, you know what? It eliminates that sense of urgency that they need to eat it, or that they need to hide it, or that they need to eat it in private. So it really helps to shift their mindset and make them feel more comfortable knowing that they can eat it whenever they want. Very important. And then questions to ask during your journey while you're legalizing these foods is, do I really like the taste of this food? So that's where when you practice eating it mindfully, using your senses, how does it taste? How does it make my body feel? People will talk about their favorite fast food restaurant. And sometimes it may upset their stomach or it might make them very tired. And so then they realize, you know what? This doesn't make my body feel good. And would I choose to feel this way again? And why do I choose to eat in this manner? So, really important questions to ask yourself on your journey to making peace with food. Now we're going to take a look at honoring your hunger to make peace with food. So this is the hunger fullness scale, if you've ever heard of it. Hunger is not bad, but what you don't want to get is to a point where you are starving. It's not a good feeling, right? For those of us who've experienced it. So hunger is your body's request for energy and food. And I cannot tell you how many of my clients will ignore hunger or say that they don't feel hunger. And a lot of times it's because they're really ignoring it or they're denying it. So it sets you up for failure. And once you reach that point of feeling really hungry, all good intentions are off for making balanced, healthy choices at mealtime. Signs of hunger would be things like rumbling or gurgling sensation in your stomach, difficulty focusing, low energy, irritability, that hangry feeling, maybe getting a headache, or thinking about foods that sound good to you. So when I get clients that say to me, "Oh, I don't feel hungry," in the morning or I won't eat until the evening, they're usually admitting that they do have cravings throughout the day or they are thinking about foods, but they're refusing to eat because they want to wait until later. Or sometimes people feel like eating just takes up too much time. So we encourage them to identify that and to fuel their body and not ignore those potential symptoms of hunger or signs of hunger. So trust your hunger cues. Using your hunger scale, a hunger scale, which we'll look at in a moment, can help add more depth to your understanding of your body's hunger cues. The hunger scale allows you to assess your hunger using a number from 1 to 10. 1 is being associated with feeling starved, and 10 being a feeling of fullness. So, like maybe that Thanksgiving Day fullness that could be compared, well, to a post Thanksgiving meal. So, practice assigning a number to your feeling of hunger. This tool is really helpful if you find that you aren't able to identify your hunger, or you find that you're a refused not eater, or that you're an emotional eater. So using the hunger scale really comes in handy for those behaviors. So, you really want to stay between a 3 and a 7. So the key is not letting yourself get too hungry or too full. So this is what the scale looks like. And you can find these. You could Google the hunger scale online, and people will say, well, what should I do with it? I'll say, you know what, take a picture of it, put it on your screensaver on your phone. It's just a great thing to take with you and remind yourself. So like the guide suggests, is stay between a 3 and a 7. So 3 is pretty hungry, stomach is beginning to growl. That's where you may want to, oh, I better introduce food. And then with eating, when you're eating a meal, is paying attention to how satisfied are you? Are you slightly full, or pleasantly full, or slightly uncomfortable? What you want to do is avoid getting to that point where you're feeling stuffed because you may have consumed more fuel than you really need. So, besides making peace with food and legalizing food and honoring the hunger, is recognizing the emotional eating. This is where the hunger scale will come in handy. To determine your level of hunger, become aware of other reasons you eat. So, we all eat at times when we are stressed, upset, bored, or even happy. It is perfectly normal to eat from an emotional plate at times. But however, regularly turning to food for comfort begins to impact our physical and our mental health. And this is where we're really having a hard time identifying how we eat mindfully, how to be present. So emotional eating doesn't fix our problem. So eating that bag of chips may feel good for a moment, but it doesn't take care of the feelings. Okay. What it actually is a form of distraction. So when we talked about people will eat foods and they start to feel guilty, that's the distraction that occurs from whatever the situation was that happened that triggered them to want to eat that bag of chips. Okay. So it's really identifying what happened and figuring out how to manage that trigger versus just turning to food. So, unfortunately, the stress or negative feelings remain in an I ate an entire bag of chips, guilt, and discomfort. The other thing to keep in mind is disconnecting from the diet culture will allow us to make peace with food and practice that mindful eating. So saying goodbye to diet culture. This is so hard for a lot of my clients. And again, it can be really hard. Healthcare is a really big issue. People, a lot of the nurses, they're in the diet culture day in and day out. So it's really hard to get people to disconnect from this. Or seeing a clinician, they're always told by the clinician, you'd benefit from losing weight, when some people were just genetically born to live in larger bodies. So, identifying sources of diet culture, change the subject or remove yourself from diet focused conversations, reevaluate the social media and who you follow, and surround yourself with others who have a positive relationship with food and a healthy body image. And that is number one key. There are so many people who struggle with body image because of what we're told by society. When you know what? They're probably just meant to live in a larger body. I cannot tell you how many clients I have who are genetically predisposed to living in larger bodies and do not have any health issues. All right. So adopt a growth mindset to make peace with food. So this is a process. This definitely takes time. It's important to believe that you can improve your relationship with food and be curious and open to change. So again, there's that trust. There's no perfect way to eat, and there's no finish line in the pursuit of healthy lifestyle. The good news is there's always another opportunity to do things differently right around the corner. So this is where we try to remain judgment free and we try to learn from our mistakes. So put the perceived mistakes behind you and continue to ask yourself, what could you do differently next time? Common fears, so natural. Okay, I won't stop eating. I get this a lot, even from parents who come to me. They're concerned about their child's weight, their child is living in a larger body, and the parents are afraid that this is going to hurt their health. And when we tell them, you know what, the child needs to be told they can have what they want and how much they want, give them permission. Parents get really nervous about this, but they find when they do that, the child actually backs off, okay, because it's not considered a forbidden food. Letting go of this pseudo permission. Pseudo permission means that they were never really allowed unconditionally. Okay. It's basically eaten within a sense of temporarily breaking the rules, or a voice that says you shouldn't eat that, or your mind is still on a diet. Then there's that self-fulfilling prophecy, believes in the negative outcome versus focusing on the positive. Oh, if I eat this one food, I'm going to gain weight. Well, that is not true. We cannot gain weight from eating just one food. Or I won't eat healthfully, but you know what? You will. Once you identify how foods make you feel and practice eating mindfully, you will definitely embrace the eating healthfully, balanced plate way. And then the lack of self-trust is another common fear. So these are super important obstacles to be aware of and ask yourself, how can I overcome them? And again, seeking support is incredibly important. So the tools you need, mindset, your notebook, and the food. The mindset is going in with these. I can do this. I am capable of doing this, and I will do this. And then it's, why do I want to do this? Maybe you're tired of this yo-yo dieting, or maybe you're tired of eating for your emotions. And then asking yourself, what are my expectations? Being patient, persevering, and recognizing progress. The purpose of the notebook is helping you to set up goals. Listing foods that are forbidden, or doing that exercise that I mentioned earlier, is making a list of foods that you want to legalize. Take a note of setbacks and prepare for potential barriers and how will you overcome them. And then, of course, allowing yourself to have those foods available in your home. And the hunger fullness scale is a great tool to make available. So in summary, don't go it alone, because you can see that there's so many areas to work on. And my suggestion is identify what's the one area that you may want to work on. A lot of times I get people that say, you know what, I just want to practice eating mindfully without distraction. And that's okay, however long that takes. Okay, so it doesn't have to be working on everything at once. But make sure you let your friends know, your family know what you're working on. Make sure that you seek support, because this is a very hard behavior to tackle on your own. Reach out to maybe a health coach who has a background in intuitive eating, or a registered dietitian. There's a lot of registered dietitians out there who foster intuitive eating and have experience in intuitive eating. And then staying informed, recommended readings. The two recommended readings I have is Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Tribal, and then the workbook. So a lot of times as dietitians, we will encourage clients to get the workbook and walk them through that step by step. So this is the end of our program. Here is an example of the two books I just mentioned. Feel free to take a snapshot. I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you are inspired to step back and take a look at what behaviors you would like to change or work on improving. And if there's any questions, place them in the chat box and I'll take a moment to answer them. But thank you all so much for attending. If you can't stay, enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, and here is one right here. Oh, thank you.